Looking at the screen, you could see vast numbers of Imperial soldiers lining up one after another. Visible beside them were also large hunks of steel, rolling with continuous tracks wrapped around their wheels as they sputtered in loud bursts. Those were tanks. Going off of what we saw from our bird's eye view, they appeared to have 2,000 of them. Why do they have tanks? I called out, unable to believe my eyes. I hurriedly asked Shinji and the others and found out that the Empire was pushing for the development of modern weapons, using the Otherworlders' knowledge, science and technology. Instead of gas, it had an internal combustion engine running on magicules. These were supplied by the constant intake of outside air, which had the added benefit of not only harvesting magicules from the environment, but also served to cool the hot engine. This tank was highly versatile, and in terms of its performance alone, it easily outperformed the best tanks in my previous world. Getter said that they analyzed the magic-controlled power reactor they had excavated from ancient ruins, and modernized it. Also, magic stones could be used to fuel it. During normal operation, it gathered magicules from its environment. But for combat, magic stones were used. This was an all-terrain vehicle fit for even the roughest roads, reaching a top speed over 100 km per hour. Although coming at a great energy cost, it even had the ability to float a short distance above the ground. I felt like I was late to the party and frustrated about the fact that I didn't make them myself. The idea of a tank in this world of knights never occurred to me. We had built a train, meaning we were this close to making tanks, too. But we didn't have cars, either, so skipping straight to tanks would have been weird. I always thought that it would be a shame to popularize the use of cars, too. They were convenient, but equally dangerous, you know what I mean. Everyone would clamor to get one, but in the end, it would be impossible to ever meet demand. Resource scarcity was still a thing here, so the split between haves and have-nots was inevitable. In my opinion, using trains in urban environments was more convenient than cars. Then once everything was up and running with the trains, I wanted to invent luxurious cars for the rich. They were meant to be something people could strive for, as the ultimate status symbol. Well, that would have to wait until after the war. After all, their tanks weren't the only thing of note. They also had ships that flew in the sky. Are you for real? I wanted to shout. Having that kind of thing would make transportation a piece of cake. They could single-handedly solve logistics problems when used for war. At that point, I realized that maybe I was getting too cocky. Perhaps I was being a bit optimistic when I assumed our air superiority. I had thought about developing that sort of thing as well, but dismissed it as impossible. One does not simply develop flying ships overnight. Given enough time, we maybe could have done it, but development wasn't that straightforward. It takes a lot of trial and error before a product is ready for practical use. So, we had to applaud the research and development team of the Empire. Those guys were brilliant. But I must admit that I had a slight desire to capture at least one ship hull. Had I tried to think more outside the box and been a tad more liberal in my demands, we could have been sitting here with our very own you-know-what. Forget it. There was no use crying over spilled milk. It was something to think about for the future. After the war ended, I would try and develop a lot more things on a whim. The situation with the Empire was as I just saw. It was nothing new to me, but for some of the people here, this was their first time seeing anything of the sort. They just stared at the screen dumbfounded, unable to hide their astonishment. As far as estimates go, we could be dealing with 1 million invaders in total. Well, it's already evident as we can see. I know you may have been surprised by their weapons, but that doesn't change the fact that we have the upper hand. Don't worry. The most important part of war is to know how strong the opponent would be. At this point, we knew their abilities as if we proverbially stripped them naked. Raphael San counted that the enemy troops numbered 1 million soldiers in total. Now that may sound like a crazy number, but it was still unlikely for our side to lose. That was how strong our side was. Getter told me that there are 3 major corps in the Empire, I said. One of them, which is called the Armored Corps, has the tank troops that were shown on the screen. They call it the Magic Tank Division, and it is undoubtedly the main force of the enemy. Then, I went into further detail about the inside information I had on the tank division. That's not all the intel Getter gave me. He also attended the strategy meeting and told me everything about it. They must have learned about Getter's escape, so it was likely that they made changes in the plan that they had initially laid out in the meeting, but it was safe to assume that they didn't change the main gist of it. After all, Yuki was also there with the goal of starting a coup. He would definitely stir the other commanders up by insisting that they didn't have to be on guard as Getter was already dead. Getter also said that the Armored Corps commander Calgurio took the bait, hook, line, and sinker. He believed that the dungeon held treasures and was planning to beat the other commanders to the punch. If so, he would probably hate to make major changes to their plan, so he was likely to agree with Yuki's suggestion. It was dangerous to act on assumptions, but it was easy to guess the intent of their actions if you looked at how Calgurio was positioning his army. Gopta was the first to speak after I finished explaining. About my army that is on standby in the in-town, are we gonna fight against those tanks? Gopta brought up a good point. In fact, from the point of view of the corps commander, this question had to be asked. It was a matter of life and death. Gopta, who would always sleep during meetings, had matured. Indeed, it was because people take responsibility that they... Why are you asking such an obvious question? Benimaru demanded, turning to Gopta while I was deeply moved. The First Army will destroy their tank corps under your command. I didn't know about the Gopta murmured in a daze, somewhat shocked. Well, I could totally understand where he was coming from. Are we going to have to defend the in-town to the death? He asked, with dread in his eyes. Of course not, I said with a smile. From what I know about the tanks, you have a shot at beating them if you play your cards right. The only problem is that we don't know how many people would be hurt during the battle. To begin with, it's harder to defend than to attack, so the inexperienced green numbers will only serve as targets for the tanks. The plan isn't for you to fight till the bitter end. I took my time explaining this to try and reassure him. Hakuru, who was in charge of supporting Gopta, could apparently sense what I was playing at from the onset. He just listened and agreed to what I said. Then, what should we do? The commander's role is to think about that, but it would be hard for a first-timer like you. Benimaru, explain it to him, I said with an air of authority. Actually, like Gopta, I was no better than an amateur when it came to army stuff. I didn't know much about tactics, so I just let Benimaru do the finer details. But my approach of taking it easy and delegating stuff had many upsides. If Gopta managed to step up and worked hard, I would have even more time to slack off. We both listened to Benimaru's explanation, hoping that Gopta would do his best on this one. Listen, Gopta. The in-town is important, but it doesn't matter if you lose it. If it gets destroyed, then we can just rebuild it. If it gets taken by the Empire, then we will just take it back. The problem is about the residents being hurt. However, Rimuru-sama has already come up with a solution. We have issued an order to the residents there to evacuate to the capital Rimuru. Yep. The moment we knew the Empire would make its move, we started evacuating the civilians. It was taking time, but it should be finished before the Imperial army arrived. Come to think of it, there aren't very many residents there. Exactly. Your job is to safely evacuate the rest of them. Once you're done, go here. Benimaru pointed at the huge map spread across the table. Specifically, the central city of the armed nation of Dwarven. Look at this video. From what we can see, the Imperial army is planning to divide its forces and invade along several routes. While some of them have already entered the Great Jura Forest, there was no movement in their tank troops. If you look at the direction these troops will be going, it's clear that they're planning to move along the foot of the Kanat Mountains. There aren't as many trees there, so it doesn't affect the advance of their army. I see. You don't get it, do you? Your goal is to defend the Dwarven Kingdom, said Benimaru, as he placed a piece representing Gopta's army in front of the Dwarven Kingdom. Next, he took out a piece for the Dwarven army and placed it next to Gopta's. It is a united front. Ooh. Gopta gasped with surprise and excitement as it finally clicked. We had formed this military tactic based on Gadr's information, and had already talked to Gazel about it. In accordance with our alliance, we told him that the Empire's aim was the Dwarven Kingdom. He also pledged to send reinforcements to our aid as he had promised. Naturally, Gazel also knew that the Empire was on the warpath. He said that he was tired of turning down their repeated requests for permission to march. But sooner or later, the Empire would run out of patience, he predicted. Gazel was happy with my offer, and it was of mutual benefit. We would abandon the in-town and later rebuild it if it got destroyed. Though, if we didn't bring the battle to its doorstep, the Empire would probably spare it. It didn't really matter though, since we could always reconstruct it after the war ended. The Empire is passing through a conspicuous route because they want us to know where they will attack from. Anyone would notice an army of that size marching. Is that what you call a tour de force? Gopta, you little smartass, when did you learn such fancy expressions? So this bastard did do his studies. I was somewhat impressed. Right, Benimaru continued. This route falls right on the border between Dwarven and Tempest. Both countries will definitely notice them, and it's their way to easily gauge the other's reaction. If we carelessly provoke them, they would use it as an excuse to start the war immediately. However, since it is strictly forbidden for us to attack them first, we will start with a warning. Do you follow? Yes. If we don't make a move on them, the Imperial army will cross the Imeld River and take the high ground outside of the entrance to the Dwarven Kingdom. It's a great place for them to deploy their army since it's flat and doesn't have many trees. I see. If they end up doing this, Gazel won't sit by and wait. He's going to send his troops out and start negotiating with the other side. It's the same for us, and the Empire will have both Tempest and Dwarven as their enemies. Benimaru moved the pieces on the map, complementing his explanation with a visual demonstration of the plan. According to Gadr, the Empire was wary of a pincer attack from both our armies. As long as they hold that place, though, that's not going to happen. After all, attempting to surprise an enemy who is waiting with open arms is tactical suicide. The point of a surprise attack was to catch the opponent with their pants down. But if they anticipated our plan, not only would our advantage be moot, we'd be walking into a trap. That's why we'll let them attack us, and then crush their army head-on, Benimaru said, slamming Gobta's piece into the Empire's. Gobta was impressed. The other officers didn't seem to have any complaints, but I wonder what they thought about the difference in fighting power between Gobta's army and the Empire's. Gebel, the Third Army's commander. Yes. Your duty is to guard the evacuating civilians. Watch them from the sky and look out for people who are falling behind or need help. Understood. Once everyone's evacuated, move on to aid Gobta straight away. If the timing is right, you two can meet before the Imperial army arrives. My corps prides itself on being the fastest in Tempest. We will make it on time. Gebel replied confidently to Benimaru. But it wouldn't be that easy. When the time came to evacuate our residents, we intended to run the trains at peak capacity. Even so, moving tens of thousands of people would still take a not insignificant amount of time. Another chink in the plan was the unprecedented speed that the Imperial army was moving at. When you factored in Legion magic, we could estimate them to be marching at a surprising 80 kilometers per day. The Imperial army was currently stationed near the border. The distance from their camp to the battlefield was about 1,500 kilometers. At this pace, they would reach the battlefield in about 20 days. The reason they could keep up this pace was because each soldier had undergone some type of surgical augmentation. From what I heard, they could go without eating or drinking for a week, so their top speed was probably even higher still. Others said that the tanks could move at about 10 kilometers per hour without refueling. Since they could absorb magicules even at night, the soldiers could rest while the tanks were replenishing their energy. Surely, they would be foolish to exhaust themselves before the war began. Gadra's explanation made sense, so Benimaru and I calculated accordingly. The Imperial army might get here faster than expected, so don't let your guard down. Benimaru warned. The Imperial army should deploy their main force here, but as Gobta said, what they're doing now is a tour de force. In other words, a diversion. Their main army is on a beeline towards this very position. Benimaru took out different colored pieces for the Imperial army and scattered them in the Great Jura Forest. They wanted us to think that the tank unit was their main force, while keeping the actual main unit separately from them. Since all of the enemy's moves were on full display for me, I honestly just had to sit back and stay sharp. Even if we may be overwhelmed, Benimaru continued, we still have Geld to defend this land. Geld, please call your men back as soon as possible. Understood. I've already ordered them to return with thought communication. It won't be long before everyone gathers under me. Benimaru and Geld looked to be on the same wavelength, as they got their points across in a few words. That was Geld for you, reliable as ever. After that, Benimaru turned his eyes back to the map. Their main force will continue to hide from us. Unfortunately, Rimuru Sama's surveillance magic Argus can't tell us what's happening in the forest. That's where Saoi comes into play. At that, Saoi nodded and stood up. The forest is overgrown with thick trees, making it difficult to monitor from the sky. Even if my subordinates tried hiding throughout the forest, there's too much ground to cover, and there is a risk of being discovered. For this operation, I am counting on Moss. He has the ability to release a lot of tiny clones and use them to collect information. As such, we cannot expect them to fight, and either way, Moss has assured me that losing a clone wouldn't set us back. As of now, the eastern part of the Great Jura Forest is under Moss's surveillance. We know that the Imperial army is divided into platoons and is currently advancing there, so it's up to us to crush them. Individually, Saoi finished with a cruel smile. He did kind to spook me, to be honest. I was glad he was on our side.